Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Masaki from State 43, and today we're going to talk about a topic that has confused a lot of players, and I want to maybe just spend some time address it, especially because I'm going to be releasing my PvP video soon, so this will be a good primer topic to get into that specifically. And today's topic is going to be about troop formations, compositions, and just honestly how troop and combat works in this game. There's a lot of misinformation out there online. I've seen a couple of videos that just recommend people to send one of every troop or some combination like that, and those are just absolutely wrong. So the reason why they're wrong is simply because when you send troops, the troops actually have different purposes, and the stats are not in an equal way that it makes sense to send all three. Just as an example, let's use this level 30 here as an example. And also because I can normally beat this thing, I will only be using 120k troops instead of using my full march. So here is a flat out 33% across the board. So you divide 120k troops equally across all three different troop types. And these are the heroes I'm using. It doesn't really matter what heroes you use, but obviously, if you're fighting infected, you're going to be using Travis for the reduced stamina. So let's see what happens when you march this 33 against level 30. Crit spoiler alert, it's gonna fail, and I'll kind of show you why through the combat. While that's marching, let's talk about the troop types themselves, right? So there are three types of troops in this game, as we've talked about before. You have your infantry here. Their main purpose in this game is to just tank damage. They're not really there to do a lot of damage themselves, but they can really hold a lot of damage. And the key stat for the infantry is going to be their defense, but also their health. And for the purpose of this video, I'll just talk about the tier 10, as the star levels do affect this a little bit more. So we'll just talk about tier 10 stats all across. So in this case, look at this row here, 1 to 30, and then this is 15 and 13, right, for the infantry, or clearly health being 15. All right, let's look at what happens with the riders. So the riders' main purpose in this game is honestly, I'm not really sure what the rider purpose is. I think they're kind of like a filler unit. Now, you do have to have them in your troop composition because I think the game gives them some sort of unequal balance to help make sure you're sending troops. But technically, the riders are kind of in between the hunters and the infantry in that they have decent attack and lethality, right? And some improved health and defense. Their defense and health are very close to the hunters, but not exactly the same. So they're a little bit better than the hunters, okay? So that's what you're looking at there. And let's look at the hunters last. If you look at the hunters, their main purpose in a crowd is to damage deal. And so they can do that because their lethality is 15, their attack is 14, and then their health is very abysmal 10, and defense, right? So all these numbers kind of don't mean a lot of things. Just high level, think about it this way. Lethality is how many troops you're able to kill per round of combat. Health is kind of like how much health you can take before you're dead. Attack and defense are more of your percent of ability to do damage stats. What I mean by that is kind of like your accuracy and your dodge in most games. So higher attack means you're more accurate, you're going to hit more often. And then, of course, higher defense means more likely you're going to be able to dodge or block whatever you think of the damage. These are a little bit more hidden, and it's really hard to see attack and defense work within combat, but it's working because of the way that infantry, for example, can seemingly take more damage than they have of health. Right? So our combat's probably done. Let's see the results. So if you just send a flat 33% or even across the combat, you're going to lose this against a level 30. Right? So I before you say, hey, no combination can ever make you win against a level 30 with only 120k troops, I'll show you one that does. But let's just see what happens in this combat, right? So as you can see, these combat happens in rounds. What I mean by rounds is every time the sword clashes, but more importantly, when these numbers decrease, that's one round of combat. Why does the round of combat matter? The rounds kind of determine things like when hero skills trigger or when damage actually gets applied to the enemy troops. Right? So as you can see, with this contribution or this formation of troops, you can't even really break through even the rider layer, and you're definitely not at the hunter layer. So all of their DPS is still dealing full damage effectively to your team while your team is dead. So that's what happens when you send a flat, 33% all across. Now, looking at the stats, you might think, well, why don't I just send all infantry and hunters, right? Infantry tank the damage, hunters should then be able to DPS, right? In fact, that's what I had thought too of how the game worked, but it doesn't work this way. So I'll show you what happens when you send infantry and hunters. Okay, as you can see, we've actually lost this battle as well. So looking at the details here, at first it looks like it's going to go reasonably fine. We are losing infantry slower than them, but at some point you start realizing that our DPS has really taken a big hit, and this is from the fact that the riders can kind of do a little damage to DPS quickly. So it's not really supposed to be a big deal, but as you can see, we aren't going to win this fight. Now, we did probably do better than the 33% across, because if you recall, we couldn't even break past the riders layer. And with this combination, we are at their hunter layer, so we're almost able to kill them. So if we can only last maybe 3 or 4 more rounds of combat, we would have actually won this fight as well. And just for fun, let's do the same combat now with infantry and riders and see what happens. All right, long story short, we lost. Let's look at the combat detail here. Yep, so as you can see, we are substantially dealing less damage than before. So you can see that as the infantry is dying much slower than last round with the hunters. So my guess with hunters doing way more damage than the riders is actually correct. And yeah, actually you can see we're not even going to be able to break through their infantry layer. So that's a guaranteed loss for sure. Okay, so let's look at a combination that does work. So for this example, I'll just do it quickly. 50, 10, 40. Normally I would do a 60, 10, 30. That's actually a little bit more efficient, but this 50, 10, 40 will work as well. So let me just show you that. So here's the result of the 120k troop march against the level 30. As you can see, we defeated it with this 50, 10, 40 combination. Now, the most optimal combination actually tends to be a 60, 10, 30. So actually slightly less hunters and more infantry. The reason you want to do that is so that your infantry can last even longer. And if you employ this type of formation against your enemies who are doing basically strictly 33% across the whole combat, you're actually going to win a lot more fights as well. Okay. Last thing I want to cover within all combat is how skills work. So as you know, all of your heroes have skills and they're supposed to activate during combat, right? These numbers are different depending on which hero you use, etc., right? But in general, just think about these as a general stat that you're going to be able to see. These skills activate more when there's more enemy troops, but also when there's more rounds of combat. So that's actually pretty key, is that if you have more rounds of combat, then these skills are going to really shine. So having more infantry usually guarantees you more rounds of combat. So that's pretty much it. In conclusion, if you want to win more rounds of combat against either infected or against other players, the formation you should be using is a 60, 10, 30, and not a 33, 33, 33. That is probably the worst one. A 50, 10, 40 works. It might be a little easier to calculate that. But lastly, I do want to show you how to set up a 60, 10, 30 really easily. So if you recall, the game automatically sets up a 33% across the board. So if you want a 60, 10, 30, for example, let's say I want to march against this troop, but I want to use my Travis with my Ash and my Zoe. Okay, so you have a 33% across. How do I make this into a 60, 10, 30 or something close easily? Drag this bar until it's about 10%. So I have 13K or 14K total march. So I drag this until I hit 14, like so, okay? Around that number, you can of course type the number manually as well, but honestly, I don't really care. I think this is usually fine. Since this is already 33%, it's close enough to 30 that I don't really care. Then I just drag this executioner or infantry up to the max I can. And right there, you already have a 60, effectively very close to 60. This is like 57, 57, 10, and 33. So this will work very well against different things like infected as well. So So that's how you do it. That's it for this video. Thank you so much, and please pass this around. I think there's more people need to understand this is the optimal way to do your troops. As you can see, it's just a lot easier, a lot better. So please send this around, share with everybody you know. Make sure they understand this is how you should be setting up your troops. This is good for against everything, almost every single content of the game. So for example, if you're doing Capital Clash, unless there's some special circumstances where you're sending, for example, all infantry, most of the time you're going to be sending something like this into formation, and that really helps to win wars as well. I hope this video has been helpful for many of you. This is Masaki from State 43. Have a great day and stay classy.